Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the last 4 national elections, Americans made it clear that we won't accept the economic stagnation that we've suffered during this past decade. Mr. Obama's policies of higher taxes and regulatory burdens suppressed economic growth to a dismal 1.5% annual average. That's about half of the post-war growth rate of 3%. President Reagan averaged 3.5% annual growth by reducing the tax and regulatory burdens crushing the economy. The result was one of the greatest economic expansions in American history. The Trump administration has made significant progress on regulatory relief. It's attested by rising wages, employment opportunities, and growing consumer confidence. But tax relief is vital to finish the job. The imperative should be clear. The American corporate tax rate of 35% is the highest in the industrialized world. Now, I know there are lots of special interest loopholes that go to politically connected companies that bring the effective rate down to 18.6%, but that is precisely the problem. Many companies that haven't gotten these breaks have simply fled the country, taking trillions of dollars and possibly millions of American jobs overseas. By closing the loopholes and lowering the rate to an internationally competitive 20%, economists tell us that we can add $5 trillion to the American economy over the next decade. That averages about $40,000 per family. Now, those who dismiss this as tax cuts for wealthy corporations don't understand the dirty little secret of corporate taxation. Corporations do not pay corporate taxes. They only collect them. And there are only 3 possible sources from which they can collect them. The only people who pay corporate taxes are consumers through higher prices, employees through lower wages, and investors through lower earnings. That's your pension and 401k. Lowering the corporate tax rate not only means restoring America's global competitiveness, it invariably translates into lower prices, higher wages, and greater returns on savings and investments. The personal income tax side is also important, and this is where I've become concerned that we're getting wrapped around the axle. You know, we've had several unpleasant surprises this past week. The 46% bubble bracket, and now the Joint Committee on Taxation report that over time, many in the middle class may end up paying higher income taxes. Yes, the average taxpayer will pay less, but this raises the mystery of the 6-foot man who drowned in a pond whose average depth was 5 feet. It's now clear that some, perhaps many families, will see tax increases now and more over time. Now, as desirable as tax simplification is, I wonder if it is simply a bridge too far, given the timetable we're on, the hyper-partisan political environment we're in, and the complexities of the tax code that are certain to continue to yield unpleasant and unintended consequences. I would urge our leadership and our Ways and Means Committee to consider leaving the personal income tax structure intact, but using the budget authority instead to provide a permanent, uniform, across-the-board reduction in the rates for all tax brackets. Our back-of-the-envelope estimate is that using the current framework, we can reduce tax brackets by a full 1%, averaging about $600 of tax savings for joint filers. If we included the repeal of the individual mandate in Obamacare, we could reduce all tax brackets by 1.33%, averaging about $800 of lower taxes for joint filers. I think there are 4 principal advantages to this approach. First, it leaves no taxpayer behind. Whatever your circumstances, whatever the deductions you claim, you can be sure that your overall tax bill will go down. Second, by reducing all marginal rates, it will increase the economic growth potential of the reform. Productivity depends on how much your next dollar is taxed. That's the marginal rate, And we can bring down the top marginal rate under this reform, whereas under the current proposal, it not only stays where it is, but in the bubble bracket increases to 46%. Third, these reforms can be communicated easily to the American people. And fourth, it will remove a vast portion of the opposition that we're seeing among various business groups that imperils the entire bill. Madam Speaker, the tax reform bill that emerges from these deliberations will ultimately be judged by the prosperity that it produces and the relief that it brings to all American families. If it's done right, the tax reform bill now taking shape in Congress can deliver us to that day. But if it's done wrong, we will have squandered the most important chance the American people have given us to materially improve their lives. You know, I remember the Reagan era. Wages rose, opportunities for better jobs abounded, and everywhere you could sense the optimism that comes with prosperity and abundance. I want my kids to know what it's like when morning dawns again in the American economy. It is up to us in this chamber to make it happen, and so we must. I yield back.
The gentleman yields.